What I want to talk about right now is the issue of what I'm going to call the insidious evils of no-fault divorce and the horrors of family court. And I'm going to be talking about it as the way it's practiced right now, and I'm going to make a plea to the Republic on what you can do to help in these situations. It is insidiously evil. That's all I can say. And the horrors abound. Some of us have experienced them firsthand. We all consider ourselves to be survivors, and we want the horrors and the evil to stop so that it does not get passed on to our offspring and their offspring as well. So very briefly, I want to talk a little bit about the historical thought pattern. If you go back to Plato, prior to Christ's coming, he thought that family structure would be abolished among the ruling classes, the guardians of society. He advocated for communal child rearing and the collective responsibility. Family ties, he believed, led to personal interests over the interests of the state. So already back in Plato, we have the conflict between the interest of the person versus the interest of the state. As time went on, this evolved further and further. And if you start getting into the 17th, 18th century and so on in particular, you have a lot of socialists who've started talking about the same things. Our history is replete with these socialists. They thought that the state should play a greater role in the education and socialization of children. They thought the state should promote civic responsibility over family loyalty. One utopian socialist said, get rid of the family and live in communes. Our children should be raised in communes. The traditional family is a source of oppression, especially for women. And we see people even advocating these things today, but they don't know where the roots of some of these things are. Utopian socialism. One man wanted to weaken the traditional patriarchal structure and have complete gender equality and socialization of children to reduce family dependency. We do not want our children to be dependent upon their families and upon the parents. One person said, diminish the power of the traditional family, restructure the family. Robert Owens, again, also believed in communal child rearing. But really what I wanted to focus on a little bit was Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. They wrote in the Communist Manifesto in 1848, they were advocating for the abolition of the family, and they wrote about that later on as well. With the abolition of the family, they also wanted the abolition of individuality, the abolition of independence, the abolition of freedom, and again, the abolition of the family, especially among the proletariat. So I was looking today at the Communist Manifesto, page 45. Even the most radical flare up at this infamous proposal of communists. On what foundation is the present family, the bourgeois family, based? On capital, on private gain. In its completely developed form, this family exists only among the bourgeois. But this state of things finds itself complement in the patriarchal absence of the family among the proletarians and in public prostitution. He goes on further, but he says this, do you charge us with wanting to stop the exploitation of children by their parents? To this crime we plead guilty. Now, according to a Marxist perspective, parents are exploiters of children. They're not the protectors of the children. They're not the providers of the children. We want to get rid of this. And what I'm going to argue is that this communist ideology has been brought into the state of Texas and has spread throughout the entire United States, and many of us haven't even noticed it for what it is. I'm going to skip a couple of things just for the sake of time. I think I have about 45 minutes. I'm going to try to keep it within that, and I'll take questions afterwards if you have any as well. So when I look at Marxism, there's a couple of things we need to know about Marxism. Not only is it an economic system, not only is it a political system, not only is it an indoctrination system, I also believe that it's a religious system as well. It's got its own set of religious beliefs. It's anti-God. It's anti the Christian values that we hold and that the Republic of Texas holds in its 1836 Constitution. I was reading through that and I was very impressed, especially with Article 5, Section 1 that says ministers shall not have a place in the government, because Their responsibility is to save souls. That was tremendous. Now, for Christians to be in government, I'm fully in agreement with, and in what we live in right now, I'm also okay with the ministers that do embrace their duties to take the gospel into the public sphere, to fight for godly principles within our society. But the United States Communist Party in 1963, well, they had goals about the family. They wanted to see the family weakened. One of the things that they advocated for, this was read in the congressional record in 1963, was that they wanted to make divorce easier. And Vladimir Lenin knew, and also Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels knew, that if you destroy the family, you can destroy society. And if you destroy society, it makes you much more willing to accept communism in all of its form. How do they do this? I'm going to argue a couple of things. First off, destroy the family. You've got to destroy the family. And in many instances, what they did with marriage, when Vladimir Lenin took place, he made marriage, instead of being a religious institute performed by a minister of God that was done before the church, and people, they had their own specific ways that they did things, the Orthodox Church back then. But they wanted to make it a civil institution. Why? Because if it's a civil institution, the civil government can have authority over it. The second thing they wanted to do was to weaken the bonds of marriage, and that was by weakening divorce, by making it easier to get a divorce. Weakening the family, making it easier to get a divorce. And even what they said is that you can divorce your husband or wife unilaterally. You can just do this. There's no defense to a suit of divorce that was filed against you. In fact, you could get divorced. I think it got to the place you could basically just notify them, and it was done. It's a done deal. There's no protection for the institution of marriage. It became such a huge problem in Bolshevik Russia that in 1926, the Atlantic magazine wrote an article about the Russian effort to abolish families. And they were talking about the disaster that's taking place. Even the communists were saying, what should we do about this no-fault divorce issue? Look what's happened to our society. One peasant woman said, abortion now covers our villages with shame. Why? Because children are designed to be reared in a two-parent family. The children, offspring, again, as Jody said, my terminology may be off, and I'm also using a lot of what others can relate to as well. But children should be reared in a two-parent family with a father and a mother. Not two dads, not two moms. That is what we believe is biblical teaching. And we also believe that when there's single-parent families, there's a tragedy that has precipitated that family from forming like that. Today, we tend to idolize single-parent families. We've got to do more to support single-parent families. We need to do more to support two-parent families and stop single-parent families. People should know that marriage is the context to have sexual relations from which offspring come forth. So when I look at the de facto state of Texas right now, I've said we have accepted communist doctrine. Our divorce doctrine in the state of Texas, the de facto state of Texas, is pure Marxist, pure communism through and through. Now, if you look at the Texas State Constitution, it does say in the Bill of Rights, Article 1, Section 6, it talks about freedom of worship. All men have a natural and indefeasible right to worship Almighty God according to the dictates of their own consciences. No man shall be compelled to attend, erect, or support any place of worship or maintain any ministry against his consent. No human authority ought, in any case whatever, to control or interfere with the rights of conscience in matters of religion, and no preference shall ever be given by law to any religious society or mode of worship. But it shall be the duty of the legislature to pass such laws as may be necessary to protect equally every religious denomination in the peaceable enjoyment of its own mode of public worship. If you got married in a church by a minister, if you were Christians, your marriage was religious in nature. God is the one who originated marriage. Go back to the Garden of Eden. God is one of the very last events of the Bible is what? The marriage supper of the Lamb. Where did Jesus perform his first miracle? At the wedding of Cana in Galilee. God is very specific about his hatred of divorce. I despise, I cannot stand divorce. It's not to say that it can never happen. There are some provisions, and they're very limited. But right now in the state of Texas, we have unlimited provision for divorce at any time for any reason. For no reason, you can make up a reason. It doesn't make a difference. You want a divorce, you get it. It's a predetermined outcome. There is no defense. This is Marxism 101 at its inception. This is what we have in the state of Texas. In the Republic of Texas, I hope you never embrace anything like that. And I hope that you stand strong for the necessity for strong families and for children to have access and to be reared by both parents. So this is such a big issue that, I'll get back to this in just a moment. But our legislators in the state of Texas, the de facto state of Texas, have a duty to create laws to protect the religious freedoms and practices of the people. They have a duty to make laws that our consciences not be violated. When I entered into a marriage, I took a vow to God. I made a covenant to God. I did it in the presence of many witnesses. They can all say, over 200 people, we were there, we saw it, we know you did this. And yet a judge, a secular judge, who may not be a person of faith, who may be a Marxist at heart, who may be somebody who believes in all sorts of sexual perversion and immorality, can, without any cause, just say, you are divorced. When I went down to the GOP convention, it was a meeting that we were trying to get platforms changed. A few years ago, one lady heard my testimony. She said, I could never understand how my pastor could marry me, but this judge could divorce me against my will. This is a huge, huge issue. Now, we have an instrument of subjugation in Texas. They call it the Texas Family Code. I kind of refer to it more as the Marxist monstrosity. 1,633 pages as of its last rendition, the Marxist monstrosity. The underlying premise of this Marxist monstrosity is that children or offspring are not yours. They belong to the state. You are the custodians. We are in charge of everything that you do. So the Marxist monstrosity, it gives the appearance that it's pro-marriage and pro-family, but it's actually very pro-divorce industry and pro-family destruction industry. What has always astounded me when we've gone down to testify in Austin is that the people who sit on this committee hearing cases, there was one session, 3 of the 9 individuals were divorce attorneys. They know they profit by divorce. They know they profit by conflict. And they're going to give you the yay or the nay on your testimony and on legislation that was being passed. There's one guy down there who I very, very sympathetic to the LGBTQIA plus whatever community. Another guy who I believe is probably an adherent of, at least in his heart, if not on paper, the Chinese Communist Party. We've got the divorce attorneys, some very strong feminists who are anti-God, the way that I perceive them. So at the very beginning, we're looking at 4-0 against us. Every so often, we might get one of them to flip. But that's what we are facing in Texas. And they keep on adding these things to the Marxist monstrosity. A few years back, it was about 1,550 or 60 pages. They've added about another 80 pages since then, something like that. But they're going to still do this because they're fighting for your families. We have to actually be awakened to see that that's not what they're doing. And again, I hope with the Republic of Texas, you understand this, that you will reject Marxism completely, and that you will let free people live as free people and worship God and practice their religion faithfully as they ought to be able to do. Now, the Marxist monstrosity does recognize that marriage creates a family, but the interesting thing is that the Marxist monstrosity, otherwise known as the Texas Family Code, it never defines what marriage is. And they have definitions. Section 1, they have definitions. They talk about the marriage relationship. Okay, let's see what a marriage is. It's silent. But they do define one term. Court. What is the court? They are right from the beginning letting you know that they are going to take authority over your family, your marriage, everything. The court is defined. Marriage is not. And again, the underlying presumption is that the state controls your family and your family life. The judge, who may not share your values in the least, can tell you what is in the best interest of your children and what is in the best interest of your family. Furthermore, the state can nullify your vows and your covenant that you made before God, in contradiction to the Bill of Rights and in contradiction to the way free men who fear and love and worship God should be able to live. I'm going to briefly, and I'm doing this a little bit as background. So the Marxist monstrosity the Texas Family Code that I call the Marxist monstrosity. Chapter 1 talks about the general provisions of public policy. Again, marriage is not defined, the court is defined. But they do also talk about one other thing. They haven't told you what marriage is, but they do tell you about how to dissolve a marriage. The dissolution, the suit for the dissolution of marriage. See, you get married before God, but now they say you need a lawsuit. You have to get the state involved. You've got to get the judges, the attorneys involved to dissolve your marriage. We've already stated this is a religious matter to many people. It is a vow before God. And there was also in Waite versus Waite 2001, the dissent of one of the justices said, this is unconstitutional what's going on in Texas. The government should have no authority in determining what is essentially a religious issue. The public policy of the state of Texas, the de facto state of Texas, is that in order to provide stability for those entering into the marriage relationship in good faith and to provide an orderly determination of parentage and security for the children of the relationship, that it is the policy of this state to preserve and uphold each marriage against the claims of invalidity unless a strong reason exists for holding the marriage void or voidable. A strong reason and no-fault divorce are not the same thing. There are people who go through the no-fault. And by the way, let me clarify what no-fault divorce is in many times. It's forced divorce. It's divorce against your will. It's divorce with perjury attached to it. Divorce for any reason, for no reason. It's divorce where I can file a petition because I've been doing something really bad to my wife and I can cover up my crimes. And I can take the children from her. The petitioner always wins. It's guaranteed. The respondent cannot win. Well, how can you say that? Because the attorneys tell you, I'm going to fight for you and you're going to win. No. Because if a respondent is an unwilling participant in the divorce, the only way that respondent could win would be to say, divorce denied. You can separate, there's other avenues, but this legal thing that has taken place in the eyes of the state of Texas should not be able to be dissolved for no reason, for a lying reason, for any reason, against the person's will. It deprives the person of due process, deprives children of the right for both parents to be actively involved in their lives. No-fault divorce is not a strong reason. Chapter 2 talks about the marriage relationship. The interesting thing about the marriage relationship is that there's one paragraph that I can tell that actually talks about the marital relationship, and that's the right and the duties of the spouses. That's the duty to support. Section 2.501 talks about that you have the duty to support each other. The marriage relationship has 17 pages talking about a marriage license. 17 pages talking about a license for that which is a fundamental right. We have the fundamental right to marry somebody, and the state says, no, here's a license. Now, the thing is, if you look at it clearly, again, this is my perspective, my reading. I'm not a legal expert. I'm not an attorney, so I've got to make that disclaimer because he's trying to get legal advice. No, I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying, the clear reading of the Marxist monstrosity, as I read it, they say that a license is necessary for a ceremonial wedding. But you can't get married apart from a ceremonial wedding. You can have an informal marriage. But the formal ceremony, you have to go through all this process, and if you don't do it right, you could be fined, and if you don't do it, you could be committing a misdemeanor, and if you don't file things by a certain time, you might have to pay a fine, and all these different penalties for this license. And they're talking about a marriage relationship. What does that have to do? The marriage license, as we know, creates an unholy trinity. The state, the husband, and the wife, and we oversee everything. Versus the free man, the person who is a man of faith, saying, God is the head of our marriage relationship. I have a duty to love and honor my wife. She has a duty to love and honor and respect and obey me in things. I know the obedience part sometimes ruffles some feathers, but I'm just saying, just telling you what the Bible teaches. We can talk about that later if we wanted to. But the state says, no, 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 no. Like Vladimir Lenin, we are going to tell you what your marriage should be like and what your family should look like. So again, you don't need a license from what I can read for an informal marriage. But I would also say too, if you are a minister of the gospel, you should never submit. You should never perform a marriage in which there is a marriage license issued. I think that we need the church to rise up and say, absolutely not. We stop it here. It used to be what? When you married, two people took their vows and their names were signed in their family Bible. And you can notice the state, hey, we are now married. You know, the offspring of our marriage, they have certain rights and privileges and inheritances from us. And they're not yours. They're our offspring, and they have the inheritance rights. And you can send in a certificate. In fact, Alabama, I believe, has already abolished the marriage license. And we should do the same thing in Texas. And again, if you're a minister of the gospel, I will tell you, you should never, in my opinion, never ever marry anybody who comes to you with a marriage license. Because you're marrying them in the name of Christ, but the marriage license is saying, well, Christ, move on over, because we're the state, and we're going to come and take his place. This is a very important issue, and our churches have compromised on this tremendously. And then when a divorce suit comes, they say, well, we can't do anything. You know, this you got to try to work. You know, the church has become very weak because we've accepted the Marxist monstrosity to govern our lives. It's very interesting as well that it says that there should be no discrimination in the issuing of these licenses to get married. And there was a judge down in Waco, and I got to meet her about 2 months ago, Diane Hensley. Now, she was a Christian judge. And some people, I think the two homosexuals wanted to come in and force her to marry them. And she said, no, I won't do it. It violates my religious conscience. So I'm not going to do this. But here's a list of people that will do this for you. And they sued her. The State Commission on Judicial Conduct. That other monstrosity. The accessory to the Marxist monstrosity in many instances. They gave her a public reprimand because she discriminated against homosexuals who wanted to force her to marry them. And recently, the Texas Supreme Court said, no, she can sue them now. And now all of a sudden, the State Commission on Judicial Conduct just says, well, we're going to rescind that public rebuke of this judge. But I was 100% behind her. This was a very big religious liberty issue. But this is the way, unless you get one person to stand up and challenge Marxism at its core, which is encapsulated within our so-called Texas Family Code, they will continue to destroy our families, run roughshod over our offspring, and those that follow up after us. Anyway, it was a pleasure to talk with her. I actually got to talk with her attorney too, and I sent him some case law. So the interesting thing is, because right now, if you look at the U.S. Supreme Court, about 2.5 years ago, there's a case called Shurtleff versus the City of Boston, and it was a religious viewpoint discrimination. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled 9-0 in favor of the petitioner. And the petitioner was saying that the city of Boston discriminated against him because he wanted to fly a flag over the city, but the city said, no, your flag has Christian symbolism, so we can't let that happen. Now, if it would have been an LGBTQIAP plus whatever flag, we'll fly these things, like crazy. But he had some Christian symbolism. He took it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that the city of Boston discriminated against him on the basis of religion, religious viewpoint discrimination. And what I would argue is that every time that there is a divorce granted to two people, for one person who wants a divorce, when two people have entered into a religious marriage ceremony, and if you go to the Catholic Church, you can actually have a whole set of processes that you go through and to make it a valid Catholic marriage, the state should have absolutely no authority unless there is a criminal matter that takes place. And with no fault divorce, forced divorce, divorce on demand, divorce for any reason or no reason, divorce because I want to be a vegetarian, my husband doesn't want to join me, divorce for whatever reason. I mean, these are crazy things. You might laugh at them, but I've heard these things mentioned. Somebody got a divorce from my dad because she became a vegetarian and he did not want to become one. And that was the reason for the divorce. So we also have down here premarital and chapter 4. Well, chapter 3 has marital property rights and liabilities. I'm not going to get into this right now for the sake of time. Chapter 4 has premarital and marital property agreements, and they talk about the enforcement. What really struck me is that, if you're in the military and if you're captured as a prisoner of war, your wife can divorce you if they don't know where you're located. And they can sell your property and stuff like that. People try to say, well, like in the state of Texas, the de facto state of Texas, that a prenuptial will protect you. It may a little bit at times. But if the state of Texas will completely nullify a vow and a covenant you took before God, what makes you think that it's going to uphold a written contract? They're always looking for loopholes. And I can assure you that attorneys are looking for loopholes because they make a lot of money doing this stuff. It's interesting because, as you might guess, as Jody kind of mentioned in the newsletter, I went through a divorce that I wanted to stop. And I could not do so. The law gave me no defense whatsoever. And after my ex-wife got remarried, which was very shortly thereafter, which was a complete surprise to me, I also got married about 2 years later. And during that time, because of the special circumstances that we're in, my wife sent me a prenuptial. And I looked at it, and this was right before we were going to get married, and I read it. And it talked about the laws of the state of Texas, and I said, I cannot sign this in good conscience. If I sign this, I know the way the system works. I know how they will use it against me. I am not signing this willingly, and I'm not signing this in good conscience. And I was willing to walk because I would not do so. I said, I know who I am. I understand your need for protection. I will not do so. My word is my bond. But I am not going to sign this instrument to give the state of Texas another way to exert its power over me. And right now, the way that things are done is that the state of Texas actually incentivizes and rewards those who file for divorce. They often get this lion's share of the property. Not always, but often. They often get custody of the children. Not always, but often. They often make the person who is the unwilling participant a visitor in their own children's lives and a wallet or a purse. Your duty is to pay child support. And that's part of the whole marriage contract as well. Homestead rights, I'm not going to talk about that right now. But chapter 6 talks about the suit for the dissolution of marriage. And insupportability is in particular what I refer to because I've gone up to fellow GOP member and I said, do you know what insupportability means? And they're like, is this a trick question? What do you mean? Well, insupportability, it's not defined. We have no idea what it means. But this is the basis on which many divorces are granted. Why not just say, instead of insupportability, blah-de-blah? On the petition of any party to blah-de-blah, well, what does blah-de-blah mean? We have no idea. What does insupportability mean? We have no idea. Nobody knows. But this is how the courts of the state of Texas are granting divorces. And when it comes down to, it says the court may grant a divorce without regard to fault. This is the no-fault divorce. We're not gonna tell people the truth. We're gonna lie about it. Generally speaking, if there's a divorce, there's some reason, some fault somewhere along the line. And the reality is, many faults, we all commit faults on a daily basis. It gives us an opportunity to file for divorce every single day if we want to. But the thing is, with a covenant, we understand the spouse that we're marrying, that he or she is an imperfect human being, and part of our job is to love and accept in that other person, to overlook and forgive their stuff. But anyway, it says the court may grant a divorce without regard to any fault. Again, I believe that's perjury. I think that most people, when they file for no-fault divorce like that, when someone getting a no-fault divorce, I believe that they're lying to the court. I believe it's fraud upon the court. And the judges won't investigate that whatsoever. Has become insupportable because of the discord or conflict of personalities. Ooh, what does that mean? My wife and I have a different opinion about something. Oh, that's obviously conflict and discord. You know, every marriage has some conflict and discord. Now they try to say further that destroys the legitimate ends of the marital relationship and prevents any reasonable expectation of reconciliation. Now, the legitimate ends of the marital relationship is what that one justice said. We can't, no-fault divorce, this statute is unconstitutional because the legitimate ends for me is that my marriage may be out of obedience to God, and it's something to help me become a more holy person, to learn how to forgive, to rear my offspring, to fear and to love God. That's the legitimate ends for me. And it does not mean that, well, we've had some conflicts and now we can get rid of it. This whole thing is nuts. But she said because of that, the state has no authority, not even a scintilla of authority, to grant a divorce on this basis. And it prevents any reasonable expectation of reconciliation. Are there any tests for this? How do we know? Because one of the things they don't talk about is people who get divorced and then later remarry each other. So when did they lie? Did they lie when they got divorced? Because they said there was no expectation of reconciliation. You know, it was over, it was done, and now they're remarried. I work with somebody who's gone through this. And I've talked with people, and there's a very small percentage of people that do this. But our state has a responsibility to uphold and strengthen families and to not tear apart the marriage bond at will, at petition, for whatever reason, for any reason. And the Republic of Texas, I hope that you also believe the things that I'm saying, that you will uphold marriage vows. Marriage vows are sacred to God. And Jesus said, what God has joined together, let no man separate. Let no judge separate. Let no attorney facilitate in the separation. Let no state write Marxist laws to help tear that apart. So anyway, I'm going to go on real fast because I want to talk a little bit about some of the perverse things that I've seen in the courts. But really, let me just read this real quickly here. Insupportability, no-fault divorce. It's a lie in itself. I don't know that there's a no-fault divorce, generally speaking. It's often unilateral, often forced. An allegation is all it takes. A petition is all it takes. The petitioner always wins. There's a predetermined outcome. How would you like to go to court against somebody, and before you got your attorney and everything else, but the attorney never told you, you know what, you paid me all of this money, you're still going to lose. I'm just going to put some lipstick on this pig and make you feel better about the whole thing. There is a predetermined outcome. You will lose if you're the reluctant respondent. The judge always, without exception, will sign off on it. In fact, it's interesting. I say without exception. There have been a couple of exceptions. And when a judge will not sign off on a divorce, he or she makes the news. Can you believe this judge did not let them have a divorce? The judge is saying he hasn't met the tests. And we're mad at the judge. More judges should be doing this. The petitioning spouse can take all of your stuff, even if you've done nothing. You know, we understand that you lose property at times because you've done something to violate another person's right. You lose your freedom. But no fault says what? There's no fault. And I would say, hey, if you want to leave, leave. Marriage isn't a prison, but you don't get to take the stuff. You don't get to take the kids. A lot of stuff you don't get to, you leave it behind. You know, hey, When a prisoner comes out of prison, what does he get? A change of new suit, $20 in his pocket or something like that, and a plane ticket or a bus ticket. You want to leave, you can leave. Marriage isn't a prison. And now I understand that there are issues, real legitimate reasons for divorce. So I'm not saying get rid of all divorce. I've never said that, but I think that a lot of divorces could be marriages and families that could be saved. Crazy thing is, I talked with this one person and said, yeah, well, the judge did this, divorced them, and they found out they did not do something procedurally correct. So he had to undivorce them to have them sign something while they were remarried and then redivorce them. This is insane. Absolutely insane. There's no test for insupportability. There's no test for the discord of conflict of personalities that destroys the legitimate ends of the marital relationship. It's something the state's not even allowed to deal with. And the result is what? Your marriage, your family in the state of Texas is not legally protected at all. Marriage is a sham. The Republic of Texas, I believe, you want marriage to be something real. So I'll go on real quickly here. I don't know, how much time do I have, Jody?
11:43.
Okay, well, like I said, I just put this together, so I'll try to wrap up within 7 minutes here. But I want to talk about some of the perverse things that I have seen. So when you look at what happens with divorce and the horrors, the atrocities of family court, I think I've got 25 listed down here. I'm going to read through them real quickly. Jody and I met each other, of course, because of what's going on with our family courts. Jody's kids were kidnapped, taken to her ex-husband. We have often seen kids trafficked. They're human trafficked. They go into CPS or foster care. Foster care is notorious. There is a federal judge right now who has a lawsuit against the state of Texas because the state of Texas is not protecting children or our offspring. They may be your offspring, but they're not protecting children in general. And the state of Texas should be being fined for this. They have a fiduciary duty. They have a duty to protect these children, and they're not doing so. We have a provision in the Marxist monstrosity, section 201-107C, talks about, 201-107 talks about state and federal funds, but 201-107C says the presiding judges in the Title 4D agency shall act and are authorized to take any action necessary to maximize the amount of federal funds available under the Title 4D program. Your children, your offspring, are commodities to the state of Texas. That's the reality. And you better pay your child support or you're going to go to jail. I don't know how many friends I've had go to jail because have not been able to pay their child support. I see a hand. You're not alone. Even though there are laws against debtors' prisons, debtors' prisons are illegal. And yet this is what happens in the state of Texas. And to be fair, it's not just the state of Texas. I focus on the state of Texas because it's where I live. I can't really focus things in North Carolina or Alaska. But here I think we can. People are given jail sentences for their inability to pay child support. And while they're in jail, they're going to lose their job. They can have their license taken away from them. Well, if you can't pay your child support, you certainly don't need to have a license. So now you've taken away a person's ability to travel to work, to earn a living for his family, and now you're going to put him in jail again. And while they're in jail, you're collecting funds from another program, and you're charging him interest or her interest because of funds that are not being collected. It's insanity. It's a Marxist monstrosity. It's a Marxist paradise, I guess, for some. But for free men and free women, this is a monstrosity. Just recently, I was down in Waco. A man was sentenced to 99 years in prison for something that he did not do. 99 years in prison. I have friends that have been forced to sell their houses because their wife, there's one guy in particular, his wife sued him for divorce, and then the attorney said, he's got to pay for my fees because she won the divorce, which is a given, and now he has to sell his house. And if he doesn't sell his house, he's going to be put in jail. Perjury is rampant in family courts. Rampant. They never punish perjury. Grandparents are kicked out of their grandchildren's lives. This is what got me involved. Well, first off, I knew I wanted to change the laws, but then when I had my daughter had her offspring, I was involved in their life, and then I got falsely accused of something by CPS, the Child Trafficking Agency. And that's when I said, okay, I'm going to take down this agency too. I mean, here's the deal. When you go into these, look at the family court horrors and no-fault divorce, you're down a rabbit hole, and no matter how far down you go, there are more and more offshoots. And it's so corrupt, you cannot imagine it. You just go in for one thing, and the next thing you know, you're like, I can't believe this. You're living in an alternate universe, in a sense. Like I said, we need more people with the Jody spirit, the warrior spirit. I mean, that's how Jody and I got to know each other, because we went to some of these events, and I'm like, I'm a pretty shy person, really. And, so I got some courage from some of the things that she did, too. Children are routinely given to abusers. In Kansas, there was a boy, Adrian Jones, 7 years old in 2015, given to the father and the stepmother. They abused, tortured him. They wanted to get rid of him. They starved him, and they fed him to the pigs. I met the grandmother. A child can be shackled and taken to a detention center, forced to go to a reform school in Waco, and then forced to go to another school in Nebraska. And Rustin is here. That's his story. And he's been fighting for 10 years at least? Almost 20? Yeah. How many thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars does it cost you?
Hundreds, I don't know.
Yeah. I've been at a lot of his hearings. The judge...
Mine was 140. Mine was 140.
So this is crazy. This is the profit industry. That's what I'm saying. The Marxist monstrosity is actually something that's in place for the divorce industry, the family destruction industry. And then you've got people that will be, will say, well, we're going to get you a child custody evaluator. That could be $50,000. And they have no expertise. They're always strangers coming in and telling you how you should be rearing your offspring. You can be engaged in long-term adultery. You can beat your husband or your wife. All of these different things. You can leave your spouse because you want to be involved in a homosexual or a lesbian relationship. File for no-fault divorce and take the kids. And the judges will sign off on this. And it happens on multiple instances. Non-biological mothers. Another one from Texas. And I'm speaking mostly about Texas here. Non-biological mother took the kids, was given the ability to take the kids to California, where she's going to transition one of the sons. And Jessica Janicek, the child castration queen attorney, and Kuntz Law out of Southlake, these people are corrupt. They're evil and they're wicked, in my opinion. You have people that are men and women that are ordered, you cannot pray with your child. You cannot read the Bible with your child. You cannot take your child to church. Even if you're a minister who works there, you cannot take your child there because that would be violating the order of a judge. And if you do so, we will take your children from you. This is, like I said, the Marxist monstrosity. It's getting rid of religion. It's getting rid of families. It's getting rid of fathers. It's getting rid of mothers. It's destroying our offspring for generations to come. Then we have other accessories to the crime. The child custody scheme racket is what I've talked about. Mediation racket. There's a judge out in Collin County. His wife is a mediator. He will hear these cases and send people to his wife for mediation, and she's going to charge them. Tell me that's not a conflict of interest. There's price fixing among attorneys. We have this on video in court. The attorney's talking about how she determines her price. The surveys they send out. It's price fixing. It violates. It's prohibited by the Sherman Antitrust Act. I also think it may be price gouging because they're doing this to people that are going through a very difficult, traumatic time. I think the Attorney General of the state of Texas, for the state of Texas, should be investigating this and should be holding these people guilty. I believe that these attorneys that are engaged in these practices should have their license revoked permanently. There's ERISA violations. Arnold Yan is not here, but he's one who's filing about this right now. Collusions between attorneys. I worked with a lady who was a paralegal, and she said, Jeff, you know, when I worked for this attorney, he said, oh, I always loved it when a pretty young woman came into my office with a big pocketbook. Because he would bring her along, knowing how much money he could take, and then he would also meet with the opposing attorney, and they already knew what the outcome was. But they would discuss, I'll do this, you can do that, I'll do this, you'll do that. Why? Because every single thing is more money from your pocket to their pockets. They will take your children's college funds because their children need to go to college too. One friend, an attorney represented him as he was seeking to adopt a child that was not his. It was his wife's at the time's child. They had a couple of girls later on. And then later on, when she wanted a divorce, which nobody agreed with, she got a divorce, and that attorney now spoke against him. Here's a guy an attorney who's saying, outstanding man, he's a good person to adopt children, and now he's a scum. This is the way our system works right now. False allegations. One man who's had over 40 false allegations, most of them by proxy. So the mom in his case went and talked with all these counselors and said, oh, you know, I think he's doing this. Well, now she has a duty to report. So she files reports. It's gone on over 10 years, over $700,000, innocent of every single one. All they needed to do was prove one, and he would have lost access to his children. This is our anti-family courts, I should say. Another one. He's a FaceTime father right now because a licensed practical counselor or something like that made up stuff. Oh, you know, they're afraid of him. It was crap, the whole thing. And that's the technical term, by the way, crap. So, anyway, there's clear violations of the judicial code, clear violations of the laws of Texas, even of the Marxist monstrosity, clear violations of the Constitution at the state level and at the federal level. And yet, well, the club, the attorney club, the legal club, the judicial club, they're going to protect each other. And somehow, you know, well, we're going to make it disappear. Anyway, what can the Republic of Texas do? And I'll be summing it up really quickly here. Please, you must help the people that are in your midst. Even though there's a different, you have the state of Texas, the Republic of Texas. A lot of people are still involved with the state of Texas and the anti-family courts. Now, I would say that, first off, we should be looking at some jurisdictional issues. If you're marrying people, like I said, you don't need to have a license. Just say they're married by the Republic of Texas, and sorry, state of Texas, you have no jurisdiction. Be encouraging ministers. Look, if you're a minister and if you're part of this, we will not allow you to marry people that have a license from the state of Texas. I believe some of these judges and attorneys have committed felonies, and I would say multiple felonies. Now, I'm going to leave it at that, and what your solution to is your solution, but I'm just telling you that they have committed felonies, and I believe I've witnessed them. Again, just to, people like Jody, take a look at her booth back there. She put up some stuff. Now, I know when Jody has been very, like I said, she has a warrior spirit, and she's had such a warrior spirit that people have I don't know what to make with Jody. Some people love her, some people I don't know about Jody Mueller. But she has been fighting for her children and for her offspring. And all I'm going to say is that, what has happened to us that we will no longer fight for our offspring? In 2012, I worked for Rick Santorum, who was running for president at the time. He was running, trying to get there. But one of the things he says, we no longer talk, you won't do things to protect your children? What is going on? And one of the things he said that I remember hearing, because people said, well, Rick, what should I do? What should I do? And he said, well, I don't know, but you can do something. I'm like, okay, that's good. I can do something. I did not consider myself an extremely smart person, but I can do something. And that's when I was praying. And I think actually I have the order reversed here, but I remember praying. I'm like, God, what should I do? And he said, what is that in your hand? I'm like, it's a camera. And to which he said, use it. So, I mean, I felt like it was Moses in the Old Testament. What's that in your hand, Moses? I've got a stick. Okay, throw it down. It's going to become the rod of God. I've got a camera. I don't know how to use it. Well, but at least I had some guidance. And that's why when Jody talked about my YouTube channel, I have been doing this probably for about 10 years now, 8-10 years. We've talked about a whole sort of issues, parental alienation, what the courts are doing, what's happening to our families, our offspring, to grandparents, all sorts of people. And I would say take a look at Jody's stuff. Jody is very credible in what she's done. And in times when I could not go with her, she used to ask me, can I come up to Iowa with me? And I'm like, Jody, I'm working. But here, you want something? If you can use this to help, use it. And I think that we need to be talking about the issue of family. We cannot have a nation, a strong nation, when we have a nation of broken families. We cannot have a strong republic if we have a republic of broken families. We must absolutely strengthen our families. We must reinforce the fact that we've taken vows to God. And brother or sister, if you're trying to leave your husband or your wife, this has now become a 911 emergency, and we're here. We want to help you through this time. We're not going to give you the A-OK on this stuff. There better be a very high bar that you're going to be filing for divorce. If you have to leave, if you want to leave, fine, you leave, but you get nothing. You let the remaining spouse, the spouse who is faithful to the family, have everything. That's my opinion. That's what I talk about all the time. And I'm going to say, okay, sorry I took a little bit more time than I maybe should have, but if you have any questions, I'd be very glad to take them. Go ahead.
So, I've been hosed by the family court a lot. She knows my story. And since it's fraud mostly.
It's fraud, exactly.
There's no statute of limitations. Will there ever be a time when we can get some consideration for what was done to us?
So that's a very good question. I don't know about that, but I do know this, is that, so what I tried to do, I didn't get your name.
My name's Steve Latrell.
Steve, hey Steve. So Steve, I don't know what the legal remedies are. The Texas Constitution says that there's always a remedy at law for us, but I don't believe that that's true. I believe that a lot of times those remedies have been taken away from us. But what we do have is public shame. And that's really in part why I tried to use the YouTube channel. I mean, if you don't want your name on the front page of the Washington Post, don't do the things that put your name on the front page of the Washington Post. If you don't want a YouTube video about your corruption, don't act corruptly. I mean, I've been to judges and said, hey, they're fine, good, no problem. But I have seen corruption, especially like in Rustin's case, Jody's case, that I could name so many people that it is so corrupt that in a different time when men acted like men and we were not emasculated to some degree and being brainwashed by this Marxist crap, we would have handled things very differently and very effectively, and it would have stopped a long time ago. I'll leave it at that. Anything else? Go ahead, Jody.
Well, one, I can tell you there's, okay.
I can tell you there's Rustin, who I've been in D.C. with too. My friend Rhonda's going through it. She's homeless because of family court. She's been living in her van for I don't know how long.
Yeah.
She was in Minnesota. I met her at an event for Steve, myself. I mean, this is thousands of dollars, y'all. But
Yeah.
on the point you made about exposing it, that's what I liked in him. And when Rustin was with me, we went through the halls. Remember in D.C., Rustin? And I can't remember the guy's name we were with, but he was doing the push-ups outside. He was a vet. Cannot think of it. No, he was yes. Yes. So we were out there, and we went into my old representative's office in D.C., David Young. And even though I lived in Texas, I always kept an Iowa address. I thought that was important because then I could talk to my reps from my home state. So I walked in, remember, without any meeting, and I said, I'm not leaving until David Young gets his ass out here. And so David heard me, and I've helped his campaign. He came out, and he brought us into the office. I have pictures to prove it, and I try to get pictures so I can tell her that this is, like you said, I'm credible with
Yeah.
these pictures. It was on Facebook. And David Young said, Jody, I just want to ask you something. Do you pray? I said, what the hell are you talking about? Do I pray? And I was crying on his shoulder. I mean, he had tears all over his, shirt. And I said, that's it? He goes, that's all I can do is tell you to pray. I said, all I can do is tell you to pray. You just lost your job. Do you know who I am? I'm a nobody, but I raised holy hell in Iowa. And I went up to the Iowa State Fair, the parade, the night before our fair. There's 50,000 spectators. Half of those are from Texas. And I had David Young's picture on my truck, the phone number, the Governor Abbott's numbers on my truck, Governor Kim Reynolds' number. I'm hollering out numbers. And I told everybody to vote out David Young. I said, I'm conservative as they come. Vote his ass out. This is what he told me, and he's out. So, exposure is key. I think everyone here, what I like to do is I put posters on my truck. When I drive up to Iowa, I don't just put posters on the truck for a day. I drive around. I drive around the courthouses that harm me. I had women jumping out of their vehicles honking at me. Oh my God, that's the same judge who just took my kids. I was like, really? Get in. Let's go for a ride. And we're hollering and waving at people, and I park it in very good spots. And so cops on horses were coming over reading my signs. Oh my God, oh my God. And I just exposed the hell out of them. You can do that with a sun visor. Put up a made-up sun visor with a poster about the Sestagavy Trust, about the Republic of Texas. Just be a rolling billboard at all times. When you park your car, I put public notices right there. So they're coming up, what the hell's the name in all caps? What the hell is this? And I do it always. I did it 2 days ago. I went to Goodwill. I'm not looking for a job. I went to a resource fair and I put public notices on cars about the Republic of Texas, the name in all caps, the family court, and then I put them on my car because people are nosy. They'll come up and go, what the hell's on her car? I do it at the courthouse, wherever I'm at. So we need to do that as the Republic of Texas, but I hope you guys are listening, especially the ones in Congress. We've got to do something and set a precedence. If we're really the de jure government, we could set a precedence here with Rustin's case, my case. We can take old cases, I don't care, Jeff's case, and set a precedence and get people to join us because we're the real deal. Those people in Austin are not. So we need help out here. Like Jeff said, people don't like me. A lot of people don't like me. They don't know how to take me, and they think I'm a man-hater. I'm not a man-hater. I hate anyone that abuses kids and that keeps the kids from the other parent, period. So anyway, I hope you guys really have listened to Jeff and see all of it. Look how many victims are here. Leon's probably a victim. Rhonda, Steve, myself, there's a whole lot. And everyone here probably knows someone that lost a kid either in family court or CPS. So we need to start thinking about this. I hope you guys do. Sorry.
No, I appreciate that, Jody. And I think for some of us, we really feel like God has called us to this. What others meant for evil, God meant for good, so that we could be the part of the resistance, part of the reformation, part of the change. And that's the only way. That's the only way it makes sense to me, that I have to be a voice that God called me for some reason above and beyond what I thought. So in a certain way, I am thankful because I can go throughout the state of Texas. I've got friends that I never would have met for any other reason. And I can go almost any place, and I will probably within 50 miles of there will have somebody that I could call a friend or an acquaintance. And we may even disagree on a lot of things, but we are fighting against one thing. Our offspring are ours. They do not belong to the state. And that's what we need to be continually talking about. I'm fighting so that my grandchildren don't have to face this stuff. I want to make sure that it ends to the best that it can with me, or at least that I've contributed enough that others can take it and run with it. And I think all of us here, Rustin has been involved in 20 years. He had another hearing just a couple of days ago that I went out to in Paris. And it's like all of this stuff was pent up. And when he got up there, and they tried to squelch him, and they actually decided his case before they let him put it on the record. But I thought he was like Tony Busby, who defended Attorney General Paxson. He was outstanding. I'm like, could I please get this on videotape? But that's what it's going to need, is each one of us. And we don't know what influence we have. There's a lot of things we can be concerned about, but right now our influence is in this room. And when you go out, that's where your influence is among your people, about your friends, your family members. and your church members. The church in particular, I'm very distraught about the church. I spoke with a pastor a guy from the seminary came out and preached last week, and I told him, you need to rethink your position, because too many times the churches are compromising. Anyway.
Well, thank you, Jeff. That was very informative.
Thank you. And please, I'm going to say this, like I said, look at what Jody's put up out there. We've run on parallel tracks and sometimes overlapping, sometimes not. But Jody's story needs to be heard. And I want to thank Jody publicly because, we've worked together on a lot of things as well.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you for letting me be here.